Welcome back, City Builders. Kodiak the Kodiak here. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down patch 1.3.6 F1 coming out today, Wednesday, October 29th. Now, this video will just contain patch note information, and if you're looking for information on the Bridges and Ports DLC and all the new content related to that, you can take a look up in the annotations right now, where you can take a look at my Bridges and Ports breakdown video. It's a long one. There is a ton of new content, and I'm really excited for everybody to play it. On top of all that, there's also some really important information related to mods. I highly suggest staying to the end of the video to keep up to date on that information. Now, my last video, over 65% of those of you who watched my video were not subscribed. So before we get started, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and do not forget to turn on notifications, so you can keep up to date with all the Cities Skylines II news, tips, and tricks. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here we are in the patch notes. There is some big stuff in here, including the new water changes. Now, obviously my patch notes will look a little different because this is the pre-release copy. However, it will be exactly the same on the website, which I will have down in the description. At the top here, they do remind everybody that if you have the Ultimate Edition, you are getting the Bridges and Ports DLC, and you can also get it bundled together with the Cold Wave radio station. The prices are on screen right now, or you can just take a look at Steam, or you can take a look at my referral link and let Paradox know I sent you. I don't make any commission on it, it just lets them know that I'm the one who sent you. Now, let's dive into the actual patch notes, and they highlight some important changes here at the top. The first one is the increased noise pollution from zoned industry. This includes both the amount and radius affected by noise pollution. So keep in mind that noise pollution plays a much bigger part in your city and how people are affected by it, basically, and whether or not they'll actually want to build in certain places or develop in certain places, so keep all that in mind when building your cities. This will affect new and old cities. Now, apparently there'll be a pretty big population drop when loading an existing save. They fixed some incorrect calculations on the back end. The numbers are corrected when you first load your save, but the population should stabilize after a short while of about 5 to 10 minutes. They didn't state whether or not it's 5 to 10 minutes at triple arrow speed or if it's at just the regular speed. They didn't specify anywhere in the patch notes. But just keep in mind that you might want to run your game for a little bit, maybe while you look at some of the new content, just so your city can play catch up with all of these new changes. There's also going to be an increase in truck traffic. With the resource balancing and addition of resources being delivered to buildings before they level up, existing saves are expected to see significantly more traffic for a while. This will normalize, but may require improving areas with traffic jams. So just keep that in mind, that if you see an increased amount of traffic, it is normal, and that is going to be the kind of the new normal for traffic, really. You will see a surge at first, and it should kind of bounce back, but there will be an increased amount of truck traffic. There'll also be a multitude of reasons on why there's an increase in truck traffic, not just the resource balancing. We'll discuss that in a little bit though. Now, next up are some known issues. There's actually only one listed here, and it's the fish amount not being displayed correctly for custom maps. This affects the new game map section of the info view, both in-game and in the editor. So this right here is the screen they're talking about. So when you go to select the map, the actual info view in the bottom right-hand corner will not display the fish amount correctly on custom maps. Vanilla maps like these ones, it will, but custom maps, it will not. This information will also translate to the editor. However, if we go back to the patch notes, they do say that despite the missing information in the UI, the fish resource is simulated and functions normally. So just because it's displaying it wrong on the map view or in the editor view doesn't mean that it actually is in-game. So when you go in-game, there will still be the correct amount of fish resource in the map. Now, the fishing stuff is exclusive to Bridges and Ports as well, so just keep that in mind too. Now, the next large section of the patch notes is actually just the Bridges and Ports new content, which we went over yesterday. Again, you can find that video up in the annotations or down in the description. That video is over an hour long. There is so much new content. So next up here in the patch notes, they also talk about the new Cold Wave radio, which has 16 new songs and some new DJ content. And now here we are on to the base game changes. So these are going to affect everyone. I've highlighted the important bits per usual. Fixed office max worker decrease to 5 out of 5, and fixed an incorrect calculation of maximum number of employees in commercial zone buildings. So again, this kind of coincides with the fact that there's going to be a lot of recalculations happening in the beginning of the game when you load it up. Fixed recycling center not exporting produced resources, which is obviously a problem, and it also fixed postal facility with full storage not delivering local mail. I believe this is part of the issue that they were discussing previously in the bikes developer diary that they were talking about before. I'll leave a link to that up in the annotation and down in the description too, where we broke that video down. But they discussed some of the issues with the postal facility and how they were going to fix those. Fixed prison vans not spawning, which is obviously an issue, but they also fixed issues related to specialized industry buildings not leveling up, earning profit, and constantly collapsing, which honestly sounds like game breaking to that feature, so I'm glad that's fixed. Fixed office/industrial demand, not showing empty building factor when there is a need to fill empty office and industrial buildings. So that should make those buildings kind of develop a little bit more logistically sound. And then we also fixed high rent for single homes and adjusted the home pathfinding to make the rich household prefer low density and the poor to prefer high density. I think this makes absolute sense, to be quite honest, and I'm glad they made this change. Re-enabled building abandonment and fixed bugs related to it. I think that they disabled that due to everything related to homelessness, if I remember correctly, but that has now been re-enabled. Balanced resource chains and company profitability, so that's should again make a lot of logistical changes when you first start up your city, and increase the number of vehicles for warehouses from 3 to 10. So the warehouses that spawn in your map to store resources around your industrial areas will now have more vehicles to be able to send resources for. This will obviously increase the amount of truck traffic, which is why I stated previously that it's not just what they stated earlier. This addition to vehicles inside of warehouses will also increase the number of trucks you have in your city. Rebalance signature building company profits, and they also rebalance pollution, which we talked about before. However, they also updated residential suitability to consider air and noise pollution. So there is also a factor of air pollution that has also been rebalanced, but most of the pollution changes were centered around noise. Now, first off, they've updated and fixed all maps in relation to the water system updates. There's a lot of people asking about all the water changes and updates. So sorry, I've been very quiet on that. I genuinely did not know if I was allowed to mention anything about the water system updates. However, now I can. Yes, there is a new water system that allows water to flow a bit more better, I guess. Now, one of the major things I want to point out with the water update is that water has been added to outside the playable area. Now, I know this is really bright, but this is Dunlap. This is like the first city I ever made in Cities Skylines II when the game came out. Currently, due to mods not being ready and stuff like that, this is one of the few cities I can actually get to load. So I wanted to show you guys the fact that there is now water, as you can tell, outside of the buildable area. If we go over to this part of the city over here, you can see that the water doesn't just hit this wall and die like the trees do or the roads do or the power lines. The water actually does extend all the way out. So it should make that edge blending a little bit nicer. I really hope long term we'll be able to add some trees to a little bit of the extended area around the edges of our maps as well, just to make that edge blending even nicer. Now, there were a lot of changes to the water simulation, and I am not the best person to talk about it. I usually try to avoid anything related to fluid physics in any video game. I love Satisfactory, but I hate dealing with the fluid dynamics in that game. So I'm actually gonna pass this information explanation off to somebody else, and I highly suggest you guys go take a look at Poplar Ponderosa's video on this topic. Hopefully he has it uploaded already. If he does, it'll be up in the annotations and down in the description. Otherwise, I'll have a link to Poplar's channel down in the description. Poplar Ponderosa has made some really great maps that are currently available on the workshop as well. One of my favorites is Coos Bay, Oregon. Now, his video is going to have a lot of information in it that isn't just related to the water simulation. However, he will be having a pretty conclusive breakdown of how the water works now. He'll also have a video later this week talking about the water sources themselves in the editor. So drop him a subscription while you're over there so you can keep up to date with that information. Now that we're done with the water information, let's move on to some other changes. They've updated the City Hall bonuses. So the City Hall bonuses have changed now. So now the City Hall will provide a minus 5% city service base upkeep cost citywide, as well as a minus 15% city service import cost citywide. They've also updated the central bank bonuses to be a minus 50% loan interest citywide and a plus 1% happiness tax tolerance citywide, so you can have some more wiggle room with your taxes on your citizens. They've updated sickness to now reduce the target citizens' health by 50% and added unemployment effect to citizens' well-being. They added not enough clearance notifications for bridges in case a boat can't clear the bridge, so you get a good notification to let you know what's going on. They've also added small electricity and water consumption for small emergency shelters. So if you have those placed kind of remotely, keep in mind that they will need access to electricity and water grid now. Increased overground parking building upgrade, car wash, comfort level to increase the effects. So now the car wash is more beneficial for that overground parking building. And they also lowered the maximum city specialization bonus to 10%. Cities now also need to produce more resources to gain said specialization bonus. Next up are some UI and controller fixes, and they're kind of all worth talking about. The first one here are the controller fixes. As many of you know, I'm a big proponent to the controller fixes and having controller functionality inside of Cities Skylines 2, even if it's not available on the console edition yet. Many people with mobility issues need to use a mobility adaptable controllers. So these are modular devices that allow them to play the games that we know and love. However, many of these controllers are bound using controller inputs, not mouse and keyboard. So these are really good for people with mobility issues who need those controllers. I feel like sometimes these also give console players a little bit of hope that there's maybe some work being done on the console edition of the game, but I've heard nothing about the console edition, and I apologize to the console community. Okay, next up, we're gonna come back into game to talk about the next bit here, and they've improved the production panel with more information for production chains. So as you can see here, if you've maybe not played the game for a while, this screen should probably look really different to you. Now, some of the same diagrams are still the same, like the production chain diagram to kind of explain how everything works, like wood goes into heating and processing. Like this should all feel really similar, but obviously there's a lot more information now. They tell you if there's a deficit, a surplus, consumption, production down here in the bottom left. You can actually click around and see where the resources are. So these are all like the raw materials. And then we can click into here about processed goods, and we can kind of see how everything is being moved, how many tons are being moved. There should be a lot of new information in here for you guys to actually take a look at. This will really help you fine tune your production chains, and if you want to specialize a city, you can really fine tune that specific production chain if you want. Now, I have no idea what this screen will look like for you. I have not booted this city up since like the first or second patch, so your screen may look completely different to mine in terms of how it actually looks here on the left-hand side. Now, you can see right here as well, I've selected a warehouse, and the next thing is an improved warehouses selected info panel. Now, they've also said that they've added an info view showing buildings that trade with outside connections. So if we go over here to the outside connections info view right here, and we scroll down, we'll see that this like purple mauve kind of color is the color to show that these buildings are trading with outside connections. Now, another really cool thing that they've added as well is a new info view when you hover over buildings. Now, there's a mod that kind of does this as well, but this is now a base game feature where if you hover over, let's say, a residential building here, we do get some information now as well, where it says our Elk Street, it's level 4, and that there's 4 residents. And then if we click it, we can see into the actual info view panel itself. Now, if you hover over non-residential buildings, you'll actually just see the building level, so it's not as complex, but it's a feature that can probably build upon. Okay, I apologize. I could not take the snow anymore. I apologize to everyone's eyes. I have overridden the climate and put it in fall. Now, the next thing in game that I want to highlight is that they've added a vehicle multi-select. This allows for one or more vehicles to spawn on a selected line. So if we go down over here to our bus station, we can actually take a look at our line. So if we take a look, let's say at bus line 16, we can actually go in here and we notice that it has the bus model selected. However, we can also select the electric bus and have multiple buses on that line. So we don't just have to have that one. If you have the Colossal Order buses in your game, you can also have those on these assigned lines. Now, something many of you might have noticed are the new road wear textures. Instead of fading brightly where vehicles are driving, they now fade into a much darker color. There were definitely some arguments being made for both sides of the coin, actually, when it came to the road wear markings. If you had something like a black asphalt, the UV rays from the sun will naturally lighten that surface. However, on the flip side, if you have something like a concrete road, it will obviously get darker from the rubber running off on the concrete. However, in both cases where the tires are driving, that area will always remain darker than the rest of the road. So I'm very glad they made this change. I haven't seen such a small change inside of Cities Skylines receive such a large reaction from the community, so I'm very happy for everybody that we all get to now actually have maybe more realistic looking road wear. Now, I just placed this building down, but they did add some new animations to the satellite uplink as well as the radio telescope. Now, they also added some swaying for watercrafts, which we obviously saw in my video 2 days ago, which again, you can find a link to down in the description and up in the annotations right now, covering everything related to the Bridges and Ports DLC when I was showing off the ferries. However, they also added an animation for the oil drilling rig and the oil pumps. As you can see here, that thing's going up and down, pumping that oil, and the offshore rigs will also have that. Now, next up, they've added an error message for better handling for corrupted packages. It will be very obvious when you get one of these, and definitely a necessary feature for helping people troubleshoot. Finally, on the last page here are some bullet points related to the water system updates. So they replaced the old water sources systems with a new and improved one. There's also an option to convert maps to the new water system in the editor, and I believe that there is some ways in developer mode to actually do it in-game as well to maps that already exist. Again, Poplar Ponderosa should have all this information in his video. Just one thing though is that all new maps will use this new water system. Also, all of the vanilla maps have been updated to use this new water as well. However, your previously made saves, even on the vanilla maps, will not utilize this new water system unless you force it in developer mode. But be super mindful that there's a possibility you could just flood your entire map. So make sure you make a safety save before trying anything. And again, Poplar will have a lot of that information in his video. Now, next up are the modding fixes and improvements, and this is kind of a big deal, so it's really important that if you use Paradox mods at all, if you have any mods that aren't just maps, that you really pay attention here. So before we dive into that, I will say that there is an added functionality to cancel mod downloads. So if you were downloading a mod and you wanted to cancel it, you can actually do that now. Mod downloads are then resumed if the previous attempt was canceled. Next, let's head on over to the Cities Skylines modding Discord. This is a community Discord server, and I will leave a link to it down in the description. There's usually a lot of announcements here from the modding community, and they have some important information for players about the Bridges and Ports free patch. Now, they are warning that before you do anything else, and before you even listen to whatever I'm saying after this, subscribe and install Skive. I am a big proponent of using Skive in Cities Skylines 2. If you don't know what Skive is, it is a mod manager for Cities Skylines 2. It's brought to you by TDW, who also made it in Cities Skylines 1. Now, the Cities Skylines 1 was very particular because of how it had to communicate with Steam. However, the one for Cities Skylines 2, I like to refer to as a second-party application. While it's not a third party like an actual mod itself, it is a mod, but Skive has some extra access to Paradox mods that allows you to manage and change and delete your playsets directly from the application. It also has its own built-in flagging and warning system for mods that are broken. It'll also tell you if the version of the mod you're using is not compatible with your game version. It is incredibly helpful, and I highly suggest that you start using it if you haven't been before. Skive will also auto-update your mods for you, so it's a really useful tool. And it works much better in Cities Skylines 2 than it did in Cities Skylines 1. Now, first off, this new free patch is due to arrive tomorrow at 1 p.m., so keep that in mind. Now, warning, most of the mods you use will probably break, but it's an easy fix. Due to a change in the way that the game adds mod settings to the options menu, any mod that uses this feature will, at minimum, require a simple rebuild using the new version of the game. So if you have a mod that has settings in the option menu, it will break on this update. However, a community-led testing initiative has reviewed over 180 mods to understand the impact of this patch on most of the popular downloads on Paradox mods. Thanks to the early access program that myself and a bunch of your favorite video creators, as well as a bunch of map makers and modders are a part of, we were able to access this patch obviously early, so it allowed for 70 of the 150 mods identified to be affected to have updates ready to go. However, there are still around 80 mods that do not have a fix ready, as their authors are not a part of the early access program. This means that the authors of these 80 mods will only be able to start this process once they get their own hands on the new version, which is the same time as you. The Cities Skylines modding community has been working with mod creators to help them prepare for patch day, but please be patient with modders and others involved in this process as they work through it. Now's a great time to go down to the bottom here and read this big, bold, highlighted section. Remember, mod creators have real-world commitments and may live in time zones that are not compatible with the time of release. This could mean they can't immediately publish updates to Paradox mods, even if they were prepared beforehand. Please have patience with these updates as they're pushed live. Do not bug, annoy, or harass creators to update their mods. Real life comes first. Now is a good time to head over here to the spreadsheet right here. If we look at the left-hand side, you can actually see all of the creators who were acknowledged here as being part of the testing group. And if we go down to the bottom tab here and we go to mod testing, we can see all the mods that were checked and tested for this update. Now, the really important part here is to go over to the status tab, which we can see right here. Status number 1 is update prepared for patch day. So these are mods that will need an update on patch day. But there's nothing you need to do on your end, especially if you have Skive, because Skive should go through and auto-update these mods. If it doesn't, you can go in and force the update. If you're only using mods that need this update prepared for patch day, or have the 2 no update needed, then you're good to go. As long as your mods are up to date on launch, you should be able to load into your game just fine. And Skive should give you all the warnings you need to let you know if there's any problems. And Skive will also do all the auto updating. It's great. I highly suggest downloading and using it. Now, next up is the mods that have major issues. These are mods that need an update. If we look at the important notes on the right-hand side, you can actually see where this mod's author is aware of the need for a fix and hopes to publish an update, but is due to time zones, they may not be available right away. It'll let you know all the information that you'll need to know if this mod is going to be updated in time. The very bottom are modders that have retired, and the ones directly above that are depreciated mods. These are mods that are no longer viable or have been integrated into other mods. So these ones are for sure not going to be very useful for very long. So keep that in mind. Now, how to keep up to date with news before and during patch day. First off, obviously install Skive. We've said it before. They've said it before. I've said it before. We've all said it before. Install Skive and use its built-in compatibility reporting to know when your mod list is good to go after the updates are released. Check the spreadsheet, which I will obviously have a link to down in the description, to get a sense ahead of time whether your mods are going to be affected. Now, the changelog section at the bottom of every mod's description is probably going to be the most reliable source of info on specific mods. Now, the next section is where to find more general info. And a big just preface, I know a lot of you guys have probably been around for update days and know that mods break. If you played nearly any game, you'll know that an update day breaks a bunch of mods. This is why games that have a lot of mods don't usually push updates very frequently. RimWorld, Satisfactory, Cities Skylines, none of these games like to push updates at a high frequency because it breaks what so many players like to use, mods. And Paradox has leaned heavy into their modding community. Now, the patch notes will be available on the Paradox forums at 1 p.m. once the update goes live. So if you want to find out more information, you can always take a look at the Cities Skylines subreddit, the wiki, or the Paradox forums, or the Cities Skylines modding Discord, which I will obviously leave a link to in the description. Now, just for one final bit of clarification here, you do not need to do anything other than update your mods and remove the ones that are broken. But just be mindful of the ones that are, and be patient for those modders that can't get their update out right away. Now, that's everything included in the Cities Skylines II Bridges and Ports patch 1.3.6 F1. Now, I gotta go edit this video. I hope you guys have a great time with the new patch and the new DLC. And if you don't own the DLC yet, don't forget to go back to my previous video where we broke down in detail all the new things included in the update. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.